You know, we're talking about sexual temptation. It's one of the subjects that we don't hear very much about in churches, and it's a subject that we try to sort of stay away from. You know, we just feel that not only is this affecting people in society generally, it's also affecting people in the church and in society in general. I mean, just to get a sort of perspective of the whole area of sexual temptation, I mean, we have the abortion clinic just across the way there, and they said in the UK there's been 40,000 abortions last year. And, you know, the UK also has the highest rate of teenage pregnancy in Europe, as well as also our young people have the highest, have contracted the highest sexually transmitted diseases as well in Europe. So it's really a subject that we should be talking about more and seeing how we can address that as well, and also in the church. And, you know, personally, it's something that has affected me. I mean, the first time I was actually came into contact with sort of pornographic material and magazines was at a very young age. Was at the age of 10 years old. You know, was when I first came into contact with that. And then it was a time when it was coming to sort of videos. You know, so a couple of years later, it was the videos, and it was sort of very hardcore videos that, you know, I had access to actually seeing at that young age. And I can see that, you know, from there, it had a real effect on my own personal life, because, you know, I can only really describe it as myself actually having really been addicted to sex. And, you know, as a really also insecure young man, I started to, it sort of led me in a really wayward lifestyle and a very promiscuous lifestyle. And, you know, I was really imprisoned to like sexual seduction and really not even wanting to get out of it, to be honest. You know, you know, it was a time when I was very insecure, so I'd always had more than one girlfriend at the time, and it was, like I said, it was really something that really affected my life. So what does God say about sexual seduction? You know, his teachings are really uncompromising in this area. I mean, you read in Colossians 3, verse 5 to 6, it says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature." It says sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. And what struck me there when you look at that list is the first thing that he says is sexual immorality. So obviously it's seen as something that God sees as something that is that important. And when you look at the verses preceding that, it actually gives us a sort of the way that we can actually start to think about dealing with this whole situation. In the verses before, which is Colossians 3, 1 to 4, it says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God." It says, "When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear in him in glory." I'll go into that a little bit further shortly, to say that really that's the first step in us actually even thinking about how we can deal with and overcome these things. And some examples in the Bible of some characters that we see really gives me encouragement. When you look at David, I mean, his name actually means, it says, the greatest of Israel's kings, and even he fell to sexual seduction. If you remember the story where, you know, he was seen to Bathsheba when he went out onto the porch and he saw her naked, and he said to one of his men to find out who she was, and they told him who she was, and she was actually married, and he still called for her to come to him, and he slept with her. So, I mean, even David, and You know, we have Solomon, and you know, his name actually speaks of him as, it says, a man of wisdom and folly. And you know, we can see that in his life, you know, because this is a man who is the wisest man, but yet he also fell to sexual seduction. You know, he, and you know, all the wives and women that he had, they turned his heart away from God and turned his heart onto serving other gods. And finally, Samson. We all know about Samson. And, you know, his name actually means the weak, strong man. You know, so this is the weak, strong man. And, you know, some of the things, I mean, I thought I'd just talk just a little bit about Samson before we talk about how we then overcome these temptations, because, you know, we can often find ourselves in that position as being the weak, strong men, or the weak, strong women. And it says that Samson, he was separated unto God because he was a Nazarite. You know, he wasn't allowed to cut his hair from the time he was before he was born. God told his mother that, you know, he will be separated unto me. And it says, and at the same time, he had evil associations. You know, he wanted to, I mean, at the time, he was very interested in being married to one of these ladies from Palestine, the Palestinian woman. And the Palestinians were the enemies of the Israelites at the time. I mean, he was actually came to actually overcome the Palestinians so that the Israelites would then come in power. But he wanted to marry this Palestinian woman, which obviously his parents said, no, that's a no-no. But God had a plan in that. You know, even though he went down that path, the bottom line was that they did overcome the Palestinians, even though he lost his life in the process. And, you know, he was also subject to carnal appetites, because in the Bible it also talks about him when he's going to sleep with other women and, you know, visiting prostitutes. And it says, but yet he was spiritual. So he had these carnal appetites and he was spiritual at the same time, because many times you read where God came upon him in the spirit and gave him that strength. He was childish in his plans, but he was courageous in battle. You know, we see how he was fighting in battles, and you know, there's a story in there as well where he wanted to have revenge on the Palestinians and on the Philistines, on the Philistines. And then when he got some foxes together and tied their tails together and set them on fire, you know. And in a sense, that was a childish thing to do, you know. But yet he was courageous in battle, and we know that he was mighty in physical strength, yet he was weak in resisting temptation. So how do we overcome sexual temptation?